Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Dave Dobbs here. It's the 22nd of April, 2019, and I've been talking about doing a video and kind of doing a bit of a spotlight on you guys and the comments on the, especially the last videos that were about this whole idea of me running for government. What you feel, whether you feel Europe's to blame, whether you feel kind of like Brexit is going to be all our answers, whatever you feel, because, you know, basically by the 24th I've got to come up if I'm going to run in the EU elections, which basically doesn't look really very likely at all. If I'm going to run, the money has to be in by the 24th, basically. So it's in 2 days. So 2 days to raise this this money. And obviously I put this message out. A lot of people have watched various videos, and I've spoken to quite a few people, and I can't drum up the type of interest to generate this money. You know, I really feel that. Well, let's see what your opinions are in the comments. Let's let this let's let this be the wind in this whole thing, really. You know, where you stand in this. So let's just share a screen then, and let's dive into this. Is going to be as painful for me as it is for you. And I'll excuse me, I'm just looking for the Safari page. There we go. So the last video I commented on was on so we're not too sure how this all plays out now. So that's the one we commented on. And then I made this video. Let's go to the, it's only got 1,000 views, so I doubt very much it's going to have that many comments. 141 comments. This was the one I said I was going to go through. So let's open them up a little bit more, and actually let's open that one up a little bit more. So if I can open that a little bit more, I'm not too sure if I can. Oh, there's, maybe that's the marker. And so we can all be a bit more kind of open here and that sort of stuff. So we're going to start with first one, Antea. Sounds like a waste of your time, energy and money. You know, it's all rigged and just a game to fool the people into thinking they have some sort of power with the ability to vote. Your videos on wisdom are a true source of power, and the information you give via this platform is probably going to help many more people than you stressing yourself out being deep within the system. I mean, you can imagine the sort of energy connected to those ministers and officials, and before you know it, you will be performing in some dark ritual with or without your consent. Stay away from that shit, mate. Thank you, Anto. Thank you. That's very, very good advice. So we've got Mary Kingsley adding to this, very good wisdom, adding that the real work is inner at this insane point in time, as it's the way out. I think that's supposed to be a little smiley, kind of nosy face at the end there, rather than a percent sign. I'm never too sure with all this sort of stuff. Oh, Angela First stepping in here. Now we had a lot of Angela First. Be warned is very, very strong on sort of like on Brexit, and I don't know whether she's addressed this whole thing about kind of like about where we're all going if we leave Europe. Are we not going to get signed up to an evil free trade agreement? And but like I say, I want both sides to see it before we go into this total blame game that Europe's done it all and everything else like that. We've got to be so careful, you know. We've had it so good in Europe for so long. We've really it's so terrifying what's unfolding here. Anyway, so which direction are we going in here? I'm sure. So we've got Leroy Foll. I'm sure you can think of something else other than joining the political clan. No, you are right, and you know I've never really ran for the intention of really winning. You know, I've never tried to win, but I've always felt that our involvement might be the most logical way out of this. I mean, what is the way out of this? You know, realistically, what is the way out of it that we've done throughout our history? Is kind of we've gone into these big revolutions, you know, guns blazing, and lots of people die, and we fight for certain rights. And if we're lucky, we might get the right of a vote. At the moment, we're quite high on where we want to be and what we want to achieve. We have these systems that we can all get involved with. The police force we can get involved with, the kind of like the councils that run our towns and that sort of stuff we can get involved with. We can get involved with a lot of these processes. I realise it's not perfect or anything else like that, but you look at some of these, you know, if you're in a totalitarian situation where you are completely dictated to, you know, it might be a different kettle of fish, but we have a lot of potential. We have this potential, you know, we don't even get involved in the European elections. You know, it's such a low turnout that, you know, if we could actually get some involvement and get some real kind of voices in there rather than just this, you know, wouldn't it be interesting to at least give it a go? You know, that's where I'm at. And plus, like I say, you know, from where I come into this, you know, this kind of like, this was the original message I got, was just don't let them break you out of Europe. You know, don't leave Europe to try and head to this kind of whatever it was that represented West, when I was kind of shown Britain as the Titanic in the beginning of this. You know, and I've had to kind of like follow this massive breadcrumb trail, and I'm not trying to tell you that the European Union is the best thing since sliced bread, but it is a massive trading bloc, and there's a lot worse things going on in the world at the moment to sort of like going on, it seems to be kind of like throwing all the blame onto Europe right now, you know, and just turning a complete blind eye to NATO and all NATO's activities at the moment. So we've got Denise, I don't know how to pronounce that, Kagaris? Pardon, please excuse my inability to pronounce some of these names. My opinion is no. In my opinion, politicians are mostly liars, and you, my friend, are not. I say continue with helping with the people in their awakening process. You are helping more than you know. Maybe you could update your chart with the rotation of the second Dave Dobbs object. Just my opinion. Thank you, Denise. Thank you for that. Okay, so we're gonna drop down to Iris Turner here. Either way you decide, you will be between a rock and a hard place. Governments are not for the people. If you have to question your direct experience in running, perhaps you have your answer. Best of all good things, Dave. Thank you for that. I truly don't know. I mean, you know, I am for every moment that goes by, you know, I've done it for many times and that sort of stuff. And I have tried to bring as much power into this and energy into this, but it is important to me. It is important to me, and maybe I've changed things subtly already in what I've done. I don't know. I truly don't know, Iris. But thank you for your comment anyway. So coming down now to Earth Dog. No, you are too honest and decent. It's all a game, and I don't think you are a player. You would just be giving £5,000 away. It's a business, and I pray you have no part of it. The agenda is written, and no one can affect their outcome. IMO. I probably know what IMO means, but I'm not too sure. I know it always goes all these little jargons that people use in comments and sort of stuff like that. I truly believe that we can change things. I truly believe that if we brought our protesting and all our anxiety back into the political arena, and we managed to get away from all this mind control. But I also believe that there is a massive process happening, and that just like the Colburn Bible describes, there's going to be a massive clearing when this thing passes, and it's going to pull so much of the interference away from humanity, and it's going to make our lives a lot easier on this plane after this big transit. It has a massive effect on humanity. And really what we're going to be doing more than anything else is we might not be able to achieve our collective dreams overall in this, but we might be able to stop it going into overall war. We might be able to hold it off, and that's going to be the biggest. They're just throwing a million stories at us right now to confuse us, and this is a bygone technique, and it's such a big story. It's such a massive story, because it goes so much deeper than the story I tell, obviously, because the story I get, it runs far, far, far deeper than the story I tell on YouTube, because it's already so unbelievable that we can only ever sort of scratch the surface of it. You know, if we all go, you know, as soon as you're going to Planet X and some of the videos, some of the things I make videos about, it's kind of like, you know, we have this wall of belief that stands between us and a possible future right now. And what's got to happen now is that we have to kind of blindly step as no man has stepped before, sort of thing. We've got to kind of do this kind of big kind of like step through this invisible wall where we don't see a future. It's as if there's a future there, but it's been made to look as if there's no possible future. It's like a mirage that's been placed in front of us, and it's the story of the end of the world. And it's been a very rehearsed story, and it's, as I've gone through many times, it's an age-old story. And we've got to step through that and realize that there is life beyond this. You know, many people will think that when I make this Planet X video, I make this because it's all about, oh my God, this massive great planet's going to hit us. But honestly, you know, I certainly wouldn't be doing this if I thought there was going to be the end of the world. Considering the amount of times this clearly has flown by, this is generally not the way things go down. And seeming as this is all about what's coming through humanity, and really the localized Earth problem is not such a terrible problem overall, apart from to nature and everything else like that. That the subtleties to correct this problem, as I'm understanding, and the messages I get are not that massive. But the big problem is the choices humanity has to make itself as it goes through this process, and it goes through this kind of decision process of where each human wishes to align. And the transformative process that occurs because of that alignment is it builds on various levels. It evolves on various levels. It evolves the human state, absolutely. And it forces the human state to jump to jump through a higher hoop. And that which is trying to draw humanity down at the moment and drive it into the rocks, as it is attempting to pull humanity down now, what is also coming through humanity with this massive effort to raise humanity now to a point where it can do two things. It can contain a very high level of evolved soul. And number two, if you like, it has the antibodies. It has, through dealing with this age of being so attacked, psychically attacked, and not understanding where this invasion has come from, this duality. Well, you know what, in Buddhism, where Buddhism teaches you to kind of overcome this kind of interference, you know, these meditation techniques which help you overcome the noise which kind of drags you down into this, kind of brings you out from your heart center, where you're powerful and confident. And so there's multiple levels of evolution, because that which is attempting to draw humanity down is being drawn up. That which humanity itself is going through this massive evolutionary jump because it's receiving so much new technology because of the massive trade-off that has occurred between the science and technology that has entered this realm and is being it's like a diffusion gradient. It's like there has been high intelligence feeding into humanity on one side, and humanity obviously absorbing this high level of technology and making trade-offs for this technology. There's speculation on where the technology comes from, but we can clearly see there's a massive increase in technology, right, coming into Earth. We're just, you know, everything's looking like a sci-fi movie all the time, more and more, and it's accelerating. It's coming from somewhere, and there's trade-offs, and we have to be careful what trade-offs we choose to make. We have to think carefully what trade-offs we choose to make and what we choose to give up. And whether our choices are being driven by anger or whether our choices are being driven by compassion and understanding and really looking at the bigger problem and what's going to be the root of most amount of peace and harmony. I'm not really answering your question at all, but thank you for your comment. Anyway, I'm just like, dog, thank you. Okay, so we've got Goldie Girl back here. I don't understand how you feel it's okay to go against a democratic vote by the majority of the country. It smacks of a spoiled child syndrome, Dave. We've got 3 little crying babies here. I enjoy listening to the other topics you discuss and would love you to separate the subjects. Have you had time to have a read up on the Lisbon Treaty yet? I did read it up a long time ago. Actually, I read it up back in the days of back in the days when we were sort of, I think around about 2011, 2012, around about the sort of time of we were. It was like the 750th anniversary of democracy and the 800th anniversary of the signing of Magna Carta by King John. So that would have been, yeah, so I can't remember which would have been. So it would have been 2015, wouldn't it? Yeah, so that was when I was really big, and I made lots of videos just leading up to that sort of thing, and I've done a lot of other things round about it, because I'd written a lot about it. Actually, I'd always been fascinated by that period. Not to say that obviously the Lisbon Treaty, because that's quite a recent treaty, I think, but I can just remember going through that whole kind of around about 2014 and 15. Because the Battle of Democracy was 1264, and the signing of the Magna Carta was 1215, and so it made 2014 the 750th anniversary of democracy, and it would have made 2015 the 800 year of the signing of the Magna Carta, which was kind of odd. These 2 years stood apart, and for me they were quite massive, and I shouted it out, and I was so, we had all these sovereignty meetings, and we Samba was alive at that time, and we often we were meeting up, and we had all these kind of sovereignty meetings. In actual fact, in the King Arthur here in Glastonbury, and we went massively. We were reading through the Magna Carta, we were reading through the Lisbon Treaty, we were reading through so many kind of different documents. We were sort of like, I'd come from this kind of generation of travellers as well that were really big on the kind of whole idea of Agenda 21. Back in the 80s, that was seen as a good thing, and these were all the eco warriors back in the day, on the kind of like on the the activists. These sort of things sounded like a good thing, but then the whole kind of carbon story was kind of fed in by Margaret Thatcher's kind of like cronies from the very onset. So the very science we were all getting from the very beginning, effectively from the Tories, that led us all to believe that we were all on the right side, and radicalized by this wonderful message that carbon dioxide really was the problem. We need to go after that. And we've gone after that. And as a result, it was a massive push for nuclear. We've covered the earth with nuclear power stations. We've managed to get rid of all those old, beautiful cars and replace them with all these cars. I know I regurgitate this information over and over and over again, but it's so important, because unless we address this, unless we get past this, we all want this new information with new facts, new wonders, and we want to go down this thing, but we've got to kind of, it's like we are trying to go, it's like we're doing a slingshot around a black hole at the moment, isn't it? That's literally what it's like at the moment. And we have got to go, black holes supposedly have this thing called an event horizon. This is kind of like, I would say this is kind of like, where do I get the idea of a of an event horizon? Kind of, Nassim Haramein, kind of, and really the guy who edited Laughing Gas, actually Pete Moore, who's kind of like, for me the equivalent of intelligent of kind of Nassim Haramein, just kind of not quite as discovered yet, but absolute genius, But this kind of just going round a kind of like a slingshotting around a black hole, totally feasible, but you go within the event horizon, which obviously depends on your event horizon. I imagine on a black hole orbiting anything is going to be kind of largely dependent on this kind of like on whether you've got enough sort of escape velocity. It's all down to your velocity, I suppose. So it just but we have an event horizon in sight, the point of no return in sight, and we can see that we have to navigate here. And why are we all just suddenly going for Europe? This alliance of all these countries. Why aren't we attempting to fix the problems? Is it Europe that's dragging us into all these wars? Is it Europe that's pushing all this GM food? Is Europe really behind Tony Blair? Is Europe really behind David Cameron? Is Europe behind NATO? I don't want to be on the side that's blaming here, Goldie. And I don't want to be in this situation where there's left and right wing political nonsense where you're just left as a fence sitter in between, where you just turn 180 degrees and everything that was on the right was on the left. And you turn another 180 degrees and everything just changes again. And left and right can just be a kind of nice little camp. Even Trump said he didn't know whether he was going to be a slide to run for the Democrats or the Republicans. You know what I mean? It's just like, look at Tony Blair, absolute Tory. The total Tory values is completely kind of isolated from his own political party, and everything he does plays into their hands. Everything. You know, the media putting him up as the main rep for Europe. I mean, come on, guys, see through the kind of, you know, talk about having a sort of like having the hand up the sort of like puppet's backside. I mean, it's just like so easy, all one massive kind of obvious thing. Anyway, look. Okay, so let's go down to Dana Marla. Dana Marla? Hi, Dana. So, David, what's the best way of getting your voice heard to share the knowledge you have that so many people do not know, understand, or cannot even comprehend? Every day we wake up, God gives us the chance, or for another chance, to do what we were born to do. What does your heart tell you? How best can you share the gifts you have that has brought so many of us together? Oh, bless you. Thank you so much. I think you already know. And with that said, thank you for always being humble and kind. Oh, thank you so much. That's such a lovely thing to say. I was thinking the same thing today as well, you know, Dana. I was kind of, you know, because, you know, I've got a friend who's got a book out, you know, and he said that, you know, you get a book out and you think, yeah, I've got a publishing deal. I mean, he said within a week, you know what I mean? You're kind of looking down and thinking, oh, I've only shifted, you know, whatever this week and that sort of stuff. And then you make a load of million, and you're kind of focusing whether you're going to make another million, and suddenly you've only got $1 million left in the bank. And you're sort of thinking, oh my God, I've only got £1 million left in the bank. You know what I mean? It's just like, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's funny, you know, I remember going around to this, I was house sitting for a friend, and I went next door. I don't know why I went next door. I saw the old guy next door, really old fella. And I said hi and that sort of stuff. And he said, oh, come round for a cup of tea. So I was just like, I was a bit busy and that sort of stuff. So I said, yeah, I'll pop round for a good cup of tea. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm staying at my mate's place. And at that stage, I was still writing Laughing Gas. So I was locked in this writing process. And doing at least 6 hours every day, and just doing this practice that meant waking up at 5 in the morning, doing this whole ritual for 4 years non-stop, really never missing a day. And if I did, I really kind of made it up, and you know, it had to be a total practice. But he said to me, I've written a story, and I said, what's it about? And he said, it's about belief. And I said, my goodness. I said, I'm fascinated with this idea of belief. I write so much about it. It's a concept that is forever on my mind. And I'm absolutely of a mind that belief is the channel in which our dominators use to control us. Literally, that's it. It's not complicated. It's just like, it's channel belief. And eventually, you know, we've got to break away from it. We've got to move past it. This is humanity's big evolutionary jump. And I said, have you published it? And he said, I said, what have you done with it? He said, well, he said, what can I do with it? He said, I could send it to sort of like to magazines, but where do you start? And I said, well, why not make it as a blog? And he said, oh, I can't do all that sort of stuff. And I said, can you send emails? Are you good with sending emails? And he said, yeah, I can send an email. I said, well, a blog is an email to everyone. I said, pretty much the same fields, pretty much the same sort of layout. You know, you fill it out and you kind of send it, you know, you publish it, whatever. I said, it's just, you know, it's an email to everyone, you know. And it just goes up on the Google, you know, especially if you use kind of Google blogs and all that sort of stuff, you know, you're just going to go straight into the kind of Google analytic, where you did, you know, until they started messing all around, and you're probably going to be buried under, you know, for the next kind of like 4,000 years now with the current Google Analytics. So maybe this was a bygone story, and maybe you could be considering other kind of search engines now. But here we all are on the kind of like, on the sort of like on the Google ship that seems to be sort of like yeah, it's going down. But he said, oh, I can't do that. And I said, come on. I said, you got a computer over there. I said, come on, let's just sign it up and let's just put it up on as a blog, see how easy it is. And he had a Gmail account or whatever it was, whether I did it it was a long time ago now, I think 50 years ago, and 2008, 2009, something silly like that. And so we just he pulled up his computer. He really didn't want to do it and that sort of stuff. I said, come on, I'm going to push you. We're just going to put it up there, man. And then you can press the publish button if you want to later. Okay. And so we just did this thing, and we opened it up, we dropped the text into this sort of like into the subject, into the subject thing, and I filled up with a title and a little kind of like a little description and what have you, and I said, look, you just got to decide whether you want to publish it. You know, maybe nothing will happen to it. But he published it and that sort of stuff, and we had a little look at what it looks like, and he was able to go on to his own kind of find his own question or his own subject, and via Google then, and he was very pleased to see that he was actually existed on the search engines and what have you. And it was a massive thing. It was such a massive thing. And then he came and knocked on the door about 3 or 4 days later, and he was just ecstatic because a professor in a university in New York had got in contact and asked if he could discuss his paper in a lecture. It was just like, it was so fantastic. For this guy, it just meant so much. He felt like he was a published writer by something silly like that. You know, it changed his perception. So I don't understand how, you know, I don't know how to understand how best to get my voice heard, you know, but I am doing it, aren't I? I'm just kind of like, I'm here, and you know, I'm not trying to make good videos or anything out of that. It's more the narrative that I'm talking about, and they're much more now the kind of videos that I watch now more than anything else, is people who have an interesting narrative and really spend time to get to know their subject, you know, go through it over and over and over, just keep studying it, keep working at it, keep asking for assistance, learn as much as you can about the thing that you're trying to understand. Make all the effort you can. Show that you're making all the effort you can. Make clear why you want the information. What are you trying to do with that information? How are you going to make the world a better place with that information? What's its application? Why would a third party that might wish to help you in your pathway, how would they qualify their involvement with assisting you in your mission. Think of it kind of like that. Think of it contractually. I know that sounds a bit weird, but as kind of like, as a kind of risk assessment perspective in terms of information and assistance. And the thing I talk about laughing gas, I talk about emotional mass. And that, you know, innocence is bliss, and we unlock this wisdom. But wisdom, when you have wisdom and understanding in what's happening, it creates enormous sadness, because you can't just see all the good things, you can see all the terrible things that go with that. And so it brings this enormous weight. And so we research, and it becomes heavy, and the only thing that can offset that weight is an action to counter and solve the problems, to use the knowledge and the wisdom to assist to solve the problems. And so saving the world is the therapy. Whether it's just one blog and you get it published, you have enabled yourself to feel that you've achieved something, and you have achieved something, and you've got a whole thought process together. You've cleaned up a nugget of information and you've made it whole. It's like going back in your life and going back to all these parts of trauma in your life where you think you remember bits and pieces, but there was, you know, you weren't really that aware of what was really happening. And sometimes we need to go back to these environments and revisit all these moments. That's why it's so good to write about it, to go back to these places, these times in your life that seem so void and empty, and go back and find the love, find the joy, and find the beauty in that mundane, and bring those moments together. Because when now is magical, the future is always going to be magical as well. And sometimes now is not magical because we haven't made our past magical, and sometimes we've got to go back into that story as well and correct that story and re-render that. And maybe writing is going to be this next process. You know, I'm just talking out loud here, really, Don. I hope this is all right, because I'm going through such a massive process at the moment as well. You know, this has torn my life apart. I can remember the first time I opened up the big communication myself, where, you know, I'd had a big communication up in the mountains. I'd had various. I'd had the whole communication with ayahuasca in South America, and it had blown me open. And then I'd gone off to kind of like about a year later, I'd finally realized that I was really going to do this thing. I was going to write this book that I was being told I was going to write in South America. And I was going to attempt to open this door without any ayahuasca and do this as a practice. And so my father gave me this advice, and I began this process. It was a bit like the morning pages, but also different as well. Different type of process. You know, for me, you know, in the morning pages, you kind of like, well, you know, I don't want to say anything negative about the morning pages, actually. Excuse me, just stop myself there. Because if you actually got your ass off into the position where you actually did the morning pages, you'd not come away empty-handed, I can assure you, because it is a very, 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 very fun. Any type of process where you sit down and you take the effort to write what's coming through you is always going to be a fantastic process. It's going to be a very cleansing process. But that process was when I first had my big download, and I wrote all this stuff and that sort of stuff, and then I couldn't even find it afterwards, and it was gone. I realized afterwards really that it never happened. It was all a vision. And I was just sitting there and believing that, or experiencing writing all this stuff, and having this whole experience of all these questions and these answers, and just going through and finally getting to the chance to answer all my dream questions and and this whole thing. And it just, you know, and it set me on the course I suppose I'm on now. It gave me all the answers in one fell swoop. But I could never find the document. I could never, every time I tried to look for it, where's it gone? And then I finally got to the point where I hadn't got to the end of Laughing Gas, but I kind of had also, you know, that it needed kind of a massive amount of work it needed a massive amount of work. But I got to the end of the book, and that's when I got a lot more help in it, and that's where, you know, Pete Moore, ironically, you know, got a lot more involved and massively edited it for me and worked through it. I mean, you learn more about writing really when you're actually editing a book. Then, you know, I would always say, if you ever want to learn to write a book, wait till you finish writing it. You know, because you'll just do all the hard bits then, you know what I mean? You know, if you've got something to say, you don't have to worry about whether it's going to come or not. If you've got something to say, you've got something to say. And if you haven't got something to say, then ask yourself, why I haven't got anything to say? And you'll quickly realise you've got more to say than you realise. But I finally went back up to the mountains again and decided that I had to try it, because I couldn't rewrite this connection. I couldn't fake this kind of like this narrative that I'd opened up there. I couldn't find the thing. I had all these answers, but I had no way of I couldn't recreate that. I couldn't sit down and just write that back out again. Everything it said, I could bring the wisdom of it through, and I could understand so much bigger message because of these fundamental of these other fundamental truths that had kind of like come out in this whole thing that had just turned everything on its head for me. That I got to the end of Laughing Gas, and like I say, you know, as a whole kind of like, oh my God, that could be a story, that could actually, that whole thing could be a book. Don't add any more. That's it. Now you got to kind of turn that into something. And I didn't know that, and I went for it. I thought, I'm going to go up to these hot springs, and I was up in this place called Manali, up in India, in the mountains, because I could just go up there. And it would cost you like 350 quid to fly to India, which is quite expensive, but then you could just rent a place for like 30 you know, pound a kind of like a month up in the mountains, mansions up in the mountains out of season, and just have the whole place to yourself. And these kind of little, you know, you know, you got the Tibetan kind of lots of Tibetan kind of like Tibetans kind of doing little momos and stuff like that up in the mountains, just like little shacks and stuff like that, and just vultures just flying up in the mountains, and just this tranquility and this peace. And I was just, you know, it's a terrifying space also, but you know, you throw yourself right up against it, and up there it's an absolute front line if you're kind of into that journey where you're kind of doing the work I was doing up there. And I was just like, I'm going to go off and have a think about this. And so I trekked off. It was like really late at night. It was about 11 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. It was very dark. There was snow everywhere, and I had to track through the snow. It's really dangerous in snow because you can go over ridges and all sorts of things. But I tracked off to go and have a hot spring in this kind of natural temple, which is a really hot spring. It's all snow all around it, and all the steam just coming out, and all this beautiful around this temple. And I just climbed into this temple. Really, really difficult. It's so hot. I managed to get in and just hid in the steam and just lost in the pitch blackness. And this guy just came in, and he just got into the water like it wasn't hot at all, and he just ducked down. And I just sort of said, through the sort of steam, I said, "You did that like it wasn't even hot." And he said, he said, "I have a message for you." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he sort of like, you know, he sort of came over and he said, I said, "What's that then?" And he said, "Well, first of all," he said, "You finished?" And I was like, "I'm finished." And he said, "Yeah, you're finished." And I sort of stopped and I thought about it. And as I thought about it, oh God, I could just feel the whole thing. I knew it was the end of Laughing Gas. I knew that was the end. That it had been such an amazing process writing it. It had been such an amazing process, opening this door and having this kind of this amazing conduit opened through that process. But I knew that, and I was terrified of it closing, and he said to me then, he said, does that mean anything to you? And I was just, you know, as it was just welling up with tears in my eyes, just knowing that I was entering into a different phase of this, a different stage. And I said, yes, it means a lot to me. And I said, thank you so much for coming down and bringing me this message. And he said, oh, there's another message. And I said, oh, what's the other message? And he said, is there something you're trying to do now? Something you've been trying to do, you haven't been able to do for a while, but you've been really wanting to do. And I said, and this is what I was back up in the mountains trying to get to this space, just everything I was doing. In this whole process of trying to open that door and enter that space, and you try so hard and you just don't know how to do it, whether you call it channeling or whatever it is, to open that door where you get those answers and everything, and you can sit and you have that counsel in that space. And and he said, you can do it now. And I said, I can do it now. He said, you can do it right now. And I said, really? He said, yeah. It's just like, and I could feel it in my heart. I just knew that I would be able to just go back and I could just be able to do it. And so I said, thank you, and that sort of stuff. And I went back and I sat down at my computer. And I said, you're there, aren't you? And the answer I immediately got was, yes, I've always been here. And then it said, David, he said, understand what brought you here to this place has been choices, your choices all the way through this. And this, I can't remember exactly what he said along that lines, but it was very much that kind of like, understand it's your choices that brought you here. Because they're not so quick to answer all our prayers, because sometimes we are very innocent about what we wish for. And we're also here to create an identity, a soul identity, something that we can take beyond this space, that we are proud of and happy with, and something where we can feel that we've achieved and assisted and been part and made soulmates and opened up our soul universe. So when we leave this space, we have much, what you create in love in this realm, it is so much bigger than you can ever imagine. That the opportunities that we have to go so beyond that which we see on our present day zodiacs, and to expand so beyond to a far bigger picture, it all exists with what can be made real here. If it cannot be made real here, it's not that it can't be made real on the other side in the same fashion. It's just when something's created real on Earth, to create the same thing on the other side would take far, far longer. And many of you have, just being here on this plane, obviously incarnating here in any form, you transmit a kind of identity over to the other side, your beauty and that sort of stuff. And many of you have already created enormous, beautiful, like shells, kind of projections, kind of like avatars, whatever you want to call them. What you're creating here is There's many levels of evolution, even when you just serve ego, believe it or not. Your humanity is still in service. Even in the eyes of the great, it's still in service. Because of that dynamic still enables a process where your higher self, even if you choose not to integrate with your higher self, it's definitely a part of your daily existence, even if you choose not to have that much to do with it, and it seemingly chooses not to have that much to do with you. It bears witness to everything. And I've got a funny feeling it likes to have a lot more fun than you might realize. Both sides. We get lost in these crazy stories of control and what we should and shouldn't do and all sorts of other things, and sometimes we don't spend nearly enough time having enough fun. Anyway, so Dana, I'm just waffling on here really because it's an emotional thing, and I'm letting go of something here in this process, and I just trying to bring this some energy into this. I don't know where this is going to go. I'm just kind of going through my feelings here, and probably a bit embarrassing really, but I'm going to have a little break, make a cup of tea. Well, actually, I can multitask. I can make a cup of tea here with you guys. This is about you, putting you guys on the spotlight for a change, and just going through your comments. So that you're going to see my crusty kitchen at the moment, but I'm just going to I'm going to read this question. I'll try and answer this question whilst I'm just getting the tea on the go. So, do you trust your political system? This is from Carlos Skywatcher. Okay, that's a good question. Carlos, thank you for that question. That's a really, 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 really good question, isn't it? Do I trust my political system? Your political system. When I was born on the 7th of November 1968, and around about that time, what was his name? Gregory, something Gregory. He was the black comedian who ran in the American elections. I can't remember the exact story. I put it in quite a few of my videos. But he ran in the American elections, and basically he was effectively a president-elect. He died like last year or the year just before last. I made a video. I put an interview he was in a video. I can't remember his it'll come to me in two shakes. But anyway, he the computer system had supposedly, this is what the newspaper said, that he was talking about, that he was on the front cover on because of this whole thing, but the computer had made a glitch and accidentally chosen him as president-elect, and they'd obviously taken all those votes off this black guy and just promptly gave them to Nixon, who sent all those people promptly to sort of like all those renegade voters promptly to go off and die in Vietnam. Sent them into an absolute bloodbath situation. I've just put that light on here, and I don't know if that really helps the situation at all. Makes it worse, doesn't it? Right, if I turn it down a little bit. But sorry about it, because I haven't got a lot of light in here. We're all on solar panels and that sort of stuff. But I do like it like this. I just kind of, it's nice and simple. And kettle's on, cup of tea's on its way. Do you trust in your political system? We don't have, in England, we don't have, it's not done by computers. It's all the votes are counted by the people. and each candidate can choose 10 people to go with them into the count and watch the people. Each candidate can take 10 people and watch the members of public that have volunteered to be, I don't know, counters. I don't know what you call that, but counters and sort of like vote counters, and they get watched by all the kind of like the I don't know, the people that the candidates bring in. So the more people get involved, the more transparency that we have. We have a first past the post system, which is a terrible system because it kind of records the winning majority, which is obviously still going to be a minority party, and then the majority left over that are completely unrepresented are now being ruled by a minority in the first past the post system. I don't like that part. So I don't like the first past the post. I trust the results. I don't trust the manipulation by the media and the lies that they run and everything else like that, like we saw in the kind of like we saw in with the Brexit vote, how the whole thing was just massively manipulated and people were just fed so many lies. And the time they did the vote and the way in which they used, they pumped so much money into, say, kind of like into Nigel Farage and giving him so much coverage. They had to be seen to be given equal coverage. So they put Tony Blair as pro-Europe and they gave him all that coverage. You know what I mean? They should have just got Hitler back and sort of like or kind of like or the Yorkshire Ripper or someone that would have stirred the same amount of kind of animosity. But so they had to be seen to be impartial, and so they chose Tony Blair as their impartiality, and so the British system I don't trust. I trust really, but I get, it's a great system, but it's the first past of the post. It just, it's a problem. But the European system, on the other hand, is a proportionally run system. Each member kind of runs votes in the way they do in their own member country and that sort of stuff. There are problems and all the rest of it, but I tell you what, when I go into Europe, I always quite like it. I love going into Europe. It's bloody brilliant. Why everyone's kind of suddenly blaming Europe for all the kind of like, I spend a lot of time going over there. It's such a cultural place. How it's it's just such an amazing space to go into. I can never quite understand all this stuff that. So do I trust it? What would we do if we didn't have it? How would we do it? How would we have these systems? I'm not saying that this is the answer, but at the moment, it's just turned into a massive blame game, and when none of us are addressing the fact that NATO is just endlessly dragging us into all the things that we are blaming on Europe, and our governments are absolutely intent on taking us into a free trade agreement that just rips everything away that Brexiteers kind of what they wanted. And that's really where I'm going from this. So I'm not really trying to run. And I guess if I'd probably really wanted to raise the £5,000 and I really had a platform, I might have done that. But and it might still happen. Someone might throw the money in. So okay, so we're going to move on now to so do you trust your political system? Do I trust it? Well, I think I've answered that question. All right, I've answered that question pretty much, haven't I? We are what we are. It is what it is. Could we make it better? Definitely. Could we make it proportional? Definitely. Could we upgrade it? Definitely. More people voting Strictly Come Dancing virtually than a kind of a general election. So the answer is, I guess, realistically, we've got to get somewhere between we've got to run our political system more like Strictly Come Dancing. I know that sounds bizarre, but if that's what gets people involved, we've got to add a little bit more colour and fun, and I don't know. God, we've got to kind of bring a bit more kind of pizzazz into the political arena. They're repulsing us out of it at the moment, literally repulsing us out of it, and then we don't engage, and then we watch these nasty people come into power because we don't block them in any way, we don't cut them off at the pass, we don't attempt to kind of like, and this kind of leads to this situation we're in now, where then we're blaming them when it's our apathy that often causes the problem. So Carlos Skywatcher, that's my answer to that. Okay, so we've got Reiki, is it Reiki links? Reiki links here. So, oh my goodness me, we've got a bit of a long one here. So £5,000, old Dave, you can do so much good with that money instead of playing the endless circles of political games. It doesn't do any good, you know this. It's all a rigged system of money, and you can't afford to play that way. Life is a casino slot machine versus a baccarat table. Pardon, I don't even know what a baccarat table is. That's terrible, isn't it? I haven't got a clue. But anyway, excuse me. They will do nothing more than mock you right out of effective dreams of becoming a reality with nothing to show for the money spent in attempting. Well, that's probably true. I mean, I always come on a bit of a bedding of satire and everything else like that, but it is so true. And I got to say, I do feel, just putting myself up and just saying, I'm up for doing this, and I kind of have a mind that we can get involved in these systems, and we can just do magical things if we get involved. I can remember when who was the other? Not Boris Johnson, but Livingston. His surname's Livingston. I'm trying to think of his first name. Ken Livingston. How could I forget that? Ken Livingston. He kind of like when he was in office. I'm sure it was Margaret Thatcher. I might have my stats wrong there actually, but I think it was Margaret Thatcher, and I'm pretty much sure it was Margaret Thatcher that was kind of lying. Her government was lying about all the unemployment figures, and he was kind of like I think he was mayor. I'm sure he was mayor, but he was, or maybe he was the head of the Greater London Council, which the kind of Tories all broke up, or maybe it was David, maybe it was Tony Blair. I can't remember now. It was a while back. I would have just been a kid. But Tony Blair, Ken Livingston, as head of the GLC, hung the real unemployment figures from the GLC building in defiance. It's a real kind of like in those days, people really got a lot more involved, and you got renegade characters into power, and they could bring massive change. And we have just seen this effectiveness of this massive media machine take over everything and do such a good job that they've kind of, the whole thing's been taken over, and we've forgotten to kind of to get involved. We've forgotten to get involved, and I think it's time that we engage. And unfortunately, they create a lot of movements, and they do a lot of mind control at a very advanced level. And so we have to kind of track our intentions. We have to keep coming back and start working quite logically, and make sure that we don't get dragged along in someone else's story, because we can enter with the right intentions and then meet someone who's on another story completely and not see the potential of our own story and get locked in their story. And I can be classic for that, but also I'm offering a story, and we also don't want to be so close to someone else's story either. How do we kind of be open to them all in bits and pieces? You want to reach people, stay on the side of the people in a community. Start with actively starting something positive for children and parents alike. You can bring so much awareness through actions, not suits. Convert something into food resource, like Victory Gardens idea. Dump money into stuff that will help feed body and spirit. I love these ideas, they're brilliant. Our town created a community garden and went to fight the city for the program. They solved the after school care problem. The children and elders in the community showed up in droves, ready to be outside, helped teach them, and the community esteem went through the roof. The hooped greenhouses and the plots around was paid off that summer. They made the case that the tax dollars, okay, I see where this is going, that, you know, community involvement has really kind of like, you've kind of got involved. But I'm talking about community, the same thing about community involvement in our own political process here, though, Reiki. That's exactly the same thing. I'm seeing what happens. I can remember when the mayor of Glastonbury came up to me at the local elections at the count, and I was running the local elections in Glastonbury and the general elections were at the same time. And I was running in the general elections for the birthday party, my political party. And I was trying to bring as much colour into the whole process as well, because there was this guy called John Cousins who was running for the kind of like, who was running for the Greens. And he's really, 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 really lovely guy. I mean, I'm not just saying that. He really is he's just a lovely guy. And he's got a really open take to it all. And he's seeing through a lot, you know, he's seeing a much bigger picture, attempting to see a much bigger picture. And he's open-minded to lots of ideas, you know, and so I wanted to get involved, but I didn't want to take any votes away from anyone. So, you know, I was doing strictly no policies, but my manifesto was a miracle. And so because I don't know, and it was just like, I was just having quite a bit of fun with just being a bit silly with this whole thing. And what was the process that happened? He and this mayor, I think her name was Denise, and she was also I think she'd been mayor before for a year, whether it's done every year. I'm not too sure how the process is, but she thought she was going to get voted out, and there'd been so little activity on the political front that no one was even going to get out of bed and vote, especially in the local elections. I mean, there was a good thing. There was a general elections at the time, so it pulls a slightly more voters out, but basically no one can be bothered. It's so boring. It's so ugly. No one comes out. And we'd seen in Brighton the result years before in 2001 when I'd run in the general election then, and we turned a political party. We turned our sound system into a political party, and we'd had this massive party on the night of the election, and we'd brought so much attention that the Green candidate in Brighton, his name was Keith Taylor at the time, back in 2001, and he got the biggest vote any Green candidate had ever got in the country. And that, of course, was the root of what that got that Caroline Lucas now holds. You know, he brought so much attention. And of course, it was, in many ways, it was us having this massive party and bringing so much attention into the elections that suddenly loads of people got involved. And that's kind of what I feel, as if more people get involved, if the community actually get involved in the political process. Anyway, on this was about kind of like, this would have been about 2015, I guess, 2014, 2015, that I was running in Glastonbury in the general elections for the birthday party with a manifesto of a miracle. And she came up to me at the elections on the night, and she said, and she didn't look best happy, and she said, and the votes were it wasn't looking good. You could just see where all the counters were stacking up all the different votes, and there was a little tiny pile for Green, and you could see all these other votes for all these other. And she came up to me and she said, I don't think I'm going to win, Dave. And this, you got to understand that when I'm talking about Glastonbury, I'm talking about the hippie centre of kind of Britain. And this woman, Denise, she's kind of like proper druid kind of like lady. Um, just kind of like classic kind of town crier, the kind of the person you dream to have as the mayor of your town. You know what I mean? Someone who's got a big heart and lots to say and just an agony aunt to everyone. The old-fashioned kind of type of mayor that we used to have, and that sort of stuff. They weren't kind of these kind of like profiteering tyrants that are going to just like, it's all about kind of take control of the universe. Just lovely people. Anyway, she said to me, she goes, I don't think I'm going to win this time. And I said to her, it's not over yet, Denise. And she won. Yeah, it stacked out, even though in all the other areas, it's kind of like overall, there'd been a massive turnout in Glastonbury and loads of people have won, and that's where she needed to win. And there was a massive turnout because everyone got involved. And so it's that kind of like, it's that process that I feel that we're both talking about here. What happens when we get involved and we come through this theatre show and we stop throwing this story, you can't change it, there's nothing you can do, they're all evil, and actually realise that we just got to move through that noise, and we've got to integrate, we've got to take the steering wheel, we've got to take the handlebars, we've got to take the wheel, jump into driving position and engage. So anyway, look, I get the gist of where you're going with this, but oh, listen to this. Like, praying for you to find the value in self and others, not the system, and snap out of mainstream thinking. Always of value. Old ways, thinking old ways, always of values. Sorry. Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. Thank you for that. I really get the gist of that. And so let's go down to this next one here. And I the way things are going, I'm not going to be able to do them all, am I? But because I just natter on, but we're going to get some pretty cruel comments, I think, soon. So okay. So now we've got Rick. I don't know how to say that. Sorry about this. Recalcitrant Jingo. I'm saying that completely wrong. I'm so sorry, man. I tell you, I get totally dyslexic when I look at stuff like that. So I'm always struggling with basic reading. It's funny, I just have to. I write, and when I write, everything comes out wrong, and then I have just to go back. And I've learned I had to painstakingly let myself just say, "Sod it, don't care, it doesn't matter, not important. Let it go. Stop being perfect. Let that go. Just what's coming through, and try and allow myself just to stay with the kind of message that I want to write, and not worry about punctuating it and making it nice. Pat the keys sometimes if you feel you're going to start pulling yourself into it. I've just got to dot all my things and just marvel at my words. Just pat all the keys, make a massive load of mistakes, and just carry on. Try to come out of that kind of needing to edit clean and make things make sense. Do it all afterwards. Do it all after, once you feel like you've got the chain of thought out. Don't even attempt to go back and look at it. Just steam through it. Hopefully, if you're a writer or anything else like that, hopefully some of these tips will really help you, or you're going to do these morning pages. If you find yourself correcting your work, just go over to the bucket and vomit. Don't worry about it. Just stop it. Just don't do it. Just get the message out and just start getting. And once you feel like you've had, it's like diarrhea. You know what I mean? If you stop halfway, it's going to be messy, and just don't do it. Just get it out, get it down, and then I'm gonna do something afterwards. It's like a carving, you want the bones or something. You don't give a flying, what about whether it's punctuated or anything else like that. So you've got a message coming through. That's all that matters. Where there's a message coming through, whether there's something coming through you, whether you've got something to say with passion, and whether it's powerful and it moves you, and that this is what you're here to do, and So, pats on the keyboard. Always remember that. Pats on the keyboard. It means any type of ego control coming in saying, this needs to be edited. I want to have involvement in this. It needs to be punctuated. See, anyway, I do need horrible hand gestures right now. But okay. So we've got reluctant. No, what is it? How do you say that? I saw these people choose deliberate words thinking, ha ha ha, Dave will never be able to say this word. Recalcitrant. Recalcitrant. What is a recalcitrant, by the way? But just, is it some kind of, I don't even know what it is, but recalcitrant jingo. G'day, mate. From an Aussie point of view, oh, sorry. Good day, mate. From an Aussie point of view, don't do it. Most folks in Oz hate our pollies with a passion. Don't become one of these blood-sucking parasites. Remember that you are judged by the people you hang around with. Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, that's hilarious. It's so true, though. It is so true. And I don't know, man. I'm just like, yeah, I'm 50, man. I'm not cool anymore. I'm not anything like that. I'd like to see some real involvement from the people, not waiting until it gets really, really bad and we just have to watch everything go down. I mean, how this is all going to play out. We can see that there's some big things going down. I more than anything else, by kind of being positive about Europe and trying to be positive, I'm trying to help people understand that if we end up blaming Europe for everything here, it's not going to go well for us. We've got to take this a little bit higher. It hasn't been Europe that's dragged us into all these wars. It hasn't been Europe that's sponsored all these kind of terrible kind of programs. We've got to kind of get, we're being very manipulated by sources that want a much worse situation. And that's really my role in this, and it is a perspective, and it does give me the opportunity to express this, and that's really more than anything else. Like I say, I've always got involved with politics on a very satirical sort of level, and I've always fought for last place, and largely I've won. And had a lot of fun with the process, but invariably I've got a lot of involvement, and a lot of horrible politicians are terrified when I come into the scene, because I can raise the level of involvement in certain situations, and so can you if you get involved in these situations, and show people real human qualities in these processes so they don't fear them. The media deliberately repulses you out of the arena. Remember the expenses scandal? Well, you wouldn't remember this, but we had not in the last elections, Shyster, but in the ones before in Europe, they ran the expenses scandal the whole way through, where we were fed all this information that evil politicians had taken money from their expenditures and used it to build moats around their castles. This was a story that was run all over, and suddenly we had this kind of like, these European representatives are being paid, £70,000, but they're getting all this extra money to build to expenses which they're using for home improvements, and people were just, I don't want nothing to do with them, and it caused such a low turnout, and that's how they do this. That's how they constantly run this little crazy thing. So so we're just gonna going to pause recording for one shake. I'm going to make some toast. You have to excuse me. Oh, so coming down now to Cotter 1, 2, 3. You'd be too biased against the people's vote. You'd be too biased against the people's vote. I think that's kind of like you'd be too biased to the people's vote. I just, I hear that a lot, and and as I often repeat, it's the way the whole thing was sold and packaged and pieced together. You've got David Cameron as a Remainer, as I often talk about. The whole thing making it look as if he was a Remainer. He set this whole thing up. They're all on the same. They're all on the same team working together. It's a massive thing. I've watched this coming in for a long time and seen the way they're manipulating people. Not to say Europe is perfect, but Europe is kind of what we got after the Second World War. I know it didn't come immediately, but there's been all this fighting and all this massive loss, and this was what finally came out of it. We didn't all have to fight each other over agreements in trade. That we could have a trade union that works with all the countries and open this up. I don't know if it's such a bad thing. It's it is a democratic process. And we were fed a lot of lies during that process. And it was a crazy day to do the vote. In my flyby, it was a time of a flyby, and it flooded in London, storms across England. It was a time when a lot of people were sort of like in the West Country, kind of like at the Stones and on the way to Glastonbury. Big proportion of the people like myself, travellers who don't have fixed abode, and so they can't do the kind of same sort of postal voting. There's a lot of stuff that went on that really stacked it in such a way, and the whole way in which it was sold, just giving Tony Blair and David Cameron as your Remain campaigners, trying to keep you in. It was so amazing theatre show, really, to drive that, and then call it a people's vote when you've done this massive manipulation. Remembering Farage was all over every paper and newspaper. Europe was being blamed for everything, and people love blaming. Europe done it. Europe done it. Europe done it. It's just been like, we got to be careful. And so I don't think it was the people's vote. I think it was a massive manipulation. You put Tony Blair up as sort of like as the main rep for Europe, and everyone's screaming. They're screaming, I hate Europe, but really what they're doing is they're screaming, I hate Tony. And such another big proportion of the people literally didn't believe it was going to happen. They just thought no one's ever going to vote to leave Europe. So that many of the people just thought it just couldn't happen. It just seemed so far out that they didn't get off their asses and vote, because they just didn't believe that anyone would do it. But of course, it was the much older generation that kind of were fear-mongered into doing this. Mark 621000. Why have you put your own wisdom above the holy scriptures? That will profit you nothing, Sir Dobbs. I don't know what to say to that, really. When it comes to following scriptures, what are we doing? We're still having to interpret an interpretation. You know, it's I do realize, you know, because I never saw myself, I'm not a Christian as such, you know what I mean, but I've, you know, what am I? You know, I was brought up, went to a Christian school and what have you, and I was brought up a Christian, I guess, and I wouldn't consider myself a Christian anymore. I would, and I would think, I would like to think I would walked away from the kind of like the idea of scriptures and everything else like that. But actually, after kind of following Planet X, I have become much more aware of the scriptures again. And I didn't realize how aware I had been when I was at school and I'm reading back on some of these stories, because these come up, you know, those who follow this, a big proportion certainly of my subscribers who follow Planet X come to it from a kind of Christian place. But from my perspective, we can see that Rome was falling apart before 262, when we had the kind of 3 days of darkness and earthquakes all across Europe, which we discovered because of this little we recently discovered, and I went through it in one of my previous videos. But 262 years after Christ, and after the supposed birth of Christ, terrible time for Rome. Rome's falling apart. Plagues, famines, bad time. And this is kind of like they'd been dominating the scene for a long time, and this, I feel, is when they jumped up a level and they took over. They'd worked out the paths of this great celestial object, and they decided to take it over and use that power for their own ends, which is, they were forced into it, really, because humanity itself was evolving that type of control. It seems that humanity is constantly evolving and outsmarting its oppressors, evolving constantly its oppressors. And I think that that's why this situation has all been allowed to unfold, because it's all being part of our naturally allowed natural evolution. And I think all that's assisted us through this time, since, you know, these different forms of mind control, where we sort of like start going into religions as means to control people and control the way they think. And this is another part of the process that we've had to evolve ourselves. And it's all part of the grand cycle. Is how do we come to this point where we can learn to use the wisdom passed onto us by our ancestors to tap into our own hearts, to access the same pools of wisdom that our ancestors tapped into. It's a very tricky one. So it's really late. So I'm not going to get a chance to really do much more. So I thought I'd just do this and just do the comments I've done so far, and you know, basically at the end of this, you know, I'll do some more of these comments and that sort of stuff. But you know, it's the 23rd now, and this money's not going to come, and you know, I've built up an audience doing this, developing this Herculosis, Planet X, Nemesis, blue Kachina, red Kachina. This kind of like this dwarf planet, charging this dwarf planet, and so I've got a bit of an audience there over time. I'm sure I'm sure I piss a lot of people off as well because of the way in which I deliver my message, and what I bring into that, the peculiar, especially bringing sort of this kind of notion of channeled material and things like that into it, and but, you know, I'm 51 this year. I'm 51 this year, and I've done, you know, I've been a political activist. I've been a climate change activist. I would consider myself a climate change activist. It's just, you know, as you know, the kind of what I see as, I don't see carbon dioxide as the key cause of the problem. And that's where the big deception lies. But I won't go into that right now. I just wanted a more kind of like, you know, this, I've done this sort of contemporary, you know, I've worked, you know, when I was in Hong Kong, I set up this whole kind of bogus advertising agency. I thought that if I was writing and I was writing kind of like copy for kind of like for some corporation or something like that, that would make me a writer. It was really quite naive, you know. I was in my kind of early 20s. I was a mechanic, you know. For me, writing was a big thing. It was a big. I'm trying to keep that glare out. I don't know if I'm succeeding at all. I just getting off my glasses. I can't really tilt the screen and expect that to change, can I? It wasn't until I really got back to the UK and kind of like you know, I left the UK in Norman Lamont's Black Wednesday, 1991. Grim time. And then I've popped back here and there, but I was kind of out till kind of like 98. And I came back chasing eclipse. I've been around chasing these eclipses, and it was when I got back that I really started writing. Although, funny enough, I just got this job just about sort of like about a year before, well, for the handover, and I was in Hong Kong, and I was there for the handover in Hong Kong, and I worked as a kind of like on the new airport project in this building site, trying to raise enough money to get to South America, and it started off looking like it was going to be really heavy work, except it turned out that it wasn't really a friend of mine, but it was a friend of this kid I used to know when I was a kid, like really young. Andy Brown, his name was, who lived in Lewis. He was like coolest kid on the kind of like who played up on the hills. Do you know what I mean? He was a little bit older than me, and he could just do everything. You know, he just could do everything. And we lived next to these massive cliffs. Anyway, this guy knew him, and he said, "Oh, he used to go riding on bikes." And he said he rode his bike off the side of this cliff, and he only managed to break his leg. And if you saw this cliff, it's just death on a stick. It is death on a stick. But he managed to let the bike take the whole shock of it. Anyway, we shared this whole story, and he's kind of like, says, "Oh, come and work with me," you know. And I ended up working in the storeroom with this guy called Tim, who was his best mate, one of his best mates, and he got me a really cushy job, and I basically just had to kind of like I just had to sit in this container from 7:30 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. But the money was good. The money was really good, and I used to sell sandwiches over the counter and make extra money, which paid my rent, so I could just stash everything, you know. And it was It was the first time I really had money, because even doing all the writing, I never really made any money. I was running around getting all this work, but there was no money in it. I was really working for free, just so I could build up a bit of a portfolio, really. And so I was always kind of like, but I was always running around Hong Kong with, it was having a good life, very, very good life, but I never seemed to have any money. It's kind of my standard life. And where was I going with that? And I was just stuck in this container for sort of like for kind of the best part of 10 hours a day. The workers would come in, get their tools, get whatever they needed to go off and do their jobs. I might see a few people at lunchtime and not enough at lunch. But actually what I did was I worked there for sort of like, I worked there for a year. And because I managed to get 6 months, it's crazy little by the by story, but I'd been seeing eclipse in Mongolia in 1997, just when Deng Xiaoping had died, just before the handover. And you remember Deng Xiaoping was the patriot before the present one, the sort of like the one who came up with the kind of whole system of one country, two systems. Anyway, so it was a big thing when he died in 1997, and there was an eclipse in Mongolia, and you had to go up through kind of like China to get up there. I just had no money. I had no money. I was in Hong Kong with absolutely no money. I hadn't been working for absolutely ages. Second trip to Hong Kong, I decided just to completely retire. And just, I know that sounds peculiar thing to do, but to really attempt to actually stay and not get lost in all the running around and just do very little and enjoy myself and take it easy and try and write and that sort of stuff. But this time before I was leaving, it was like it was like a year before I was leaving, and I'd just come back from Mongolia, and when the woman stamped my passport, she said you timed that very, 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 very tight. And I said, well, why do you say that? And she said, well, they only announced last night that they're changing all the visas, and they're going to stop giving working visas 6 months before the Hong Kong handover back to China, from Britain back to China, 6 months before. But the Chinese, those working visas given out 6 months before, the Chinese would honor them 6 months after the handover. So it was a kind of a 6 months, both sides sort of gap, but they had to do it without announcing it until the last moment. So it was just like, and I was just there, and she just stamped it, and it was like minutes left. And she was like, you timed that very fine. I was like, what do you mean? And she said, you can stay here for a year and work. So I ended up getting this job on this airport and working in this container, this dusty old container. And I had this computer. I didn't really do anything. I was just there to man the tools, really. It was a position, but it was a cushy job just because I knew this guy. So I didn't really have to do anything, but I was just sitting there all day. And so I started writing, and I wrote plays, and I wrote all sorts. And that was really kind of the first time I started expressing myself, and writing in a different fashion, not being so fussed about the grammar and stuff like that. That's not important, but at all, because it is so important. But we can get lost in that. And it's a very dangerous thing to get lost in before you've got something. Before you've really developed your nugget and really taken it to where you want to take it. It's nice to get it shiny, though. It is nice to get it shiny, but it's not to get it's just to attempt not to get too lost in that. And come back to what you're trying to say. And, I should do that all the time, shouldn't I? Really keep myself in check. But what is it I'm trying to do at the moment? Where is it I'm trying to go? It's a big part of understanding this message of the dangers for us leaving Europe for the reasons that we're claiming to leave Europe for. And there's a lot of heavy stuff involved in all of this. It's going to destabilize a lot of different countries, and something much bigger going on. I think you'll see it. And we have to be so careful right now of where we align ourselves in all of this. And really, it's where we align ourselves in our hearts. We can go with these stories. Brexit in many ways have brought a lot of people together on an issue, on something where everything just seemed to be so kind of like bland politically. Loads, the whole thing kind of fell apart a little bit. I think the whole protest movement fell apart a little bit after the 2003 kind of like Iraq war protests, certainly in Britain, 2 million people and you just can't change a thing. It just caused kind of a despondency, and we've seen other big protests that have been much more kind of, I don't know if they were, but kind of looking like they've been kind of more organized by the government, or certainly influenced by media, maybe not the government, but certainly by media, by agendas that are driving specific stories, running specific things to cause the public to respond in specific ways. They've been doing it for a long time. This is what they specialize in: govern, to rule over, mente, mind, government. This is their whole process, and it's a whole series of puppets, good and bad ones. The baddies get paid loads more than the goodies. Remember that. You think about in sort of like screencasting, ain't that the truth? A nice, sweet, innocent little character, It's just like 2 a penny. No offense, but 2 a penny. Do you know what I mean? A good baddie. It's a funny old time though, and what are we now? It's 23rd of April. Hearing sort of like just saw revolutionary evolutionary energy arts video, just saying there'd been a quite big earthquake somewhere, 6 point something or other, and I don't know, there's been lots of activity going on at the moment. Actually, I didn't really take too much. I think it was in the Philippines, actually, maybe the earthquake, 6.3 possibly, but we know we're coming into a lot of big stuff now, don't we? And that's where I was going with my kind of message, really. Is that this message that's been coming through, it's been massively assisted by my mum and her channeling, and by my father and his channeling, and so me kind of attuning to this space and slowly kind of adapting to it. It's been different phases. I was a kid, I wanted to be cool, I wanted to be having parties, building my own sound systems, kind of like, I didn't want to be. The channeling thing was my mum sort of thing. It was nice to go and get messages, and then every now and then they'd blow me away, and kind of things opened up more kind of when I did ayahuasca. But those kind of doors that opened for me to doing ayahuasca were kind of in South America, going on my first kind of crazy adventure after Hong Kong in South America, because I'd always been hanging out in Asia sort of thing, and really wanted to go to South America. And went to New York once when I was a kid. Well, not a kid, when I was 21 or something, and seeing that kind of wild energy that's in America, that crazy wild energy. And all my mates were telling me, it's just like that in South America and Central America. It's something wild. You guys don't know how wild you've got it over there. It's just kind of like, it's a wild land. It's like to me, it's like an animate. That whole land, the whole Americas is just like this kind of land of wild-eyed people. Kind of like a different realm. It is. It's like a different realm. It's just it's an amazing space. It's somehow feels more, always almost in tears when I'm leaving the place. Really emotional impact on me. But sorry, it's late as well, and you see, it seems like it's a political thing with Europe and everything else like that. But if you can't sort things out politically, then the army steps in, and it can be a lot harsher. And that's what we're kind of coming to now, is this point where our governments would love to bring the army in here and to lower the vibration as much as possible. My advice to you is if you really want Brexit, and you feel that this is the way you want to go on both sides of the Atlantic, because it will affect us all. It would affect this world. It will adversely affect this world. Brexit specifically, but our alignment with drawing all these countries into these free trade deals. And us as the people backing that, then we can clearly see where this is going. The Tories have made it very clear they're going into a free trade deal. That's what they've got on the table. Farage has always been in bed with Trump from the very onset. He's made that very clear. Theresa May, totally in bed with this free trade deal. It can only be done once we're out of Europe, and it places ourselves in a dangerous position. And these are very real situations that are unfolding now. I think very carefully about where you're putting your energy and why you're doing it, and who gains and who loses. Remember, everything you can do to slow down really really crazy change, like Brexit and stuff like that. Just ask yourself, if you're a Brexiteer, would you want to sign? Hand on your heart, would you want to sign that free trade agreement if it meant signing one of these, member state dispute systems that undermine your existing democracy massively because they're done in closed door courtroom processes? Would you sign your country over to one of those? It costs billions to challenge these corporations, or they can just do whatever they like in your country. Would you want that? Was that what you signed up for? Didn't you want independence, to have your government control, the government to have control over retain its own sovereignty, which was actually what the European Union was built on, to protect each country's independent sovereignty. And to offer a currency for all of those countries, so you wouldn't have big ups and downs, which made it very unstable for small countries to be buoyant in a kind of like big international market. If they had peaks and troughs in their currencies, big peaks and troughs in their currencies, because say their money came in over Christmas and summer or whatever, you know what I mean? Like sort of like places like most places in the Western world, it's kind of like, not so much Australia, obviously, different cycles, but you get my gist. It's that kind of like, it's how do you get to the point, Britain, Europe trading with Britain, all together. We are together. We are a formidable power, like the United States of America. It's together, and it's a powerful thing. I've always felt very proud to be able to go into Europe and be part of that. Felt like it was a fantastic thing to be involved with. Love to see more people get involved. Bring something special to that. Anyway, I'm going to post this now tonight. I got one day. I got one day to raise $5,000. I've raised 40. So thank you for those who've donated. I'm sorry I'm a bit tired here and that sort of stuff. And I've been going on this total tear myself apart journey with this as well. Just thinking, and even just put myself up and know what people are going to feel and think when you're just even putting yourself up as a candidate for the EU, and the blame and the hate, and how suddenly like the EU and the poor EU, you know, Parliament suddenly just completely kind of getting blamed for kind of like every nasty thing the British government has done, and kind of like, and the American government, and this like you know, the French are really cool. You know, it's funny, when I came to America to sort of like, I went out to a big protest in 1998 or 99 in Seattle for a WTO protest. It was an amazing time, and I was out there with a bunch of people, kind of helping a little bit with this film called Crowd Bites Wolf. It's really worth seeing. It's kind of Seattle, kind of guerrilla vision, kind of like, it might be on YouTube, and I'll try and find a link. But crazy time. And in that time, we met Jose. I might say his name wrong now, but Jose Bove. He's the guy who basically drove a bulldozer through McDonald's. Do you remember, sort of like, America took the McDonald's took the name French out of their fries because Iraq wouldn't join them in the bombing campaign, and so McDonald's punished them by taking French out of the name French out of their fries and calling them freedom fries. And it's around about that time, maybe a bit before, but it's around about that time, kind of like you know, it must have been before. I'm just trying to think when it was. I don't know if he'd done it at that stage, or whether he'd done it earlier. Maybe he'd done it earlier. I think he may have probably done it earlier. But whatever he'd done, you know, he was really famous at the time, and so he must have been famous for that then. You know, I can't remember really. It's a long time back. It's like 98 or something like that, 99, and it's really, really kind of exciting time to be kind of really sort of politically active. There's so much going on. Reclaim the Streets was massive. It was so exciting. So kind of like grassroots, kind of like, and he was there. He was speaking, and you know, this kind of European kind of hero, almost like a folklore hero. It's like France's equivalent of kind of Wat Tyler, something. You know, it's just like drove a bulldozer through McDonald's, and then they took him away, and in court he was charged with, you know, destroying McDonald's with a bulldozer, and they said, "How'd you plead?" And he said, "Not guilty." And the judge was like, "Well, we've got pictures of you on the bulldozer, videos of you put on the bulldozer. How can you ever claim that you didn't do it?" He said, "Oh no," he said, "that's me on the bulldozer. I done it." He said, "But I'm not guilty." And the jury said, and the judge was obviously, well, you know, that's not for you to decide. That's for the jury to decide. And he said exactly. He said the jury would decide. He said, well, the jury, if you've done it, you're guilty. And he said, yeah, but that's for the jury to decide. And the judge was like, whatever you've done it, you're guilty. And he said, well, that's for the jury to decide. And which the judge apparently got very angry, and the whole thing, you know, and in the end, it was to see what ultimately whether the jury decided he was guilty or not, and the jury found him not guilty. You know, and stories like that, they're magnificently powerful stories. Real activism, real frontline, beautiful activism. You know, it's been a great thing. I think that the European Union has been a fantastic thing. It's been the most amazing thing being part of Europe. You know, what NATO is doing at the moment is a whole nother thing. What's happening with the euro is a whole nother thing. What's happening, where this is going if Britain pulls the plug on the kind of like on the European Union, and thus pulls its money out. Where would it put it? Why would it pay all this extra tax? What's it got? What's it all lined up? You know, there's some big things happening here. Some serious decisions to make. And the path of least resistance is slow this thing down a little bit. If you're not totally sure and you don't want to go into this free trade agreement, and you think, wow, you know, and you're hearing someone like myself telling you this is not a good situation. This is my grand message in all this, more than anything else, beyond Planet X, beyond all the stuff I've gone about Mars and my whole kind of Mars research before Planet X. The Emperor Hawaiian Seamount chain and the Valles Marianas kind of trench on Mars. You know, the whole link that I talk about in my whole Mars thing, and these kind of specific things that I've kind of stuck to through this. They are all coming from the same place that has told me that if Britain leaves Europe, things won't go well. Things will go really badly. And there's a big part of the agenda that is driving through humanity that at the moment, which is very much in control of our present agenda, lost in this absolute state of belief that has got them hell-bent on believing this is really the end of the world. And thinking that I'm talking about the end of the world. I'm not talking about the end of the world. I'm talking about something that flies by every 169 years and has done for time immemorial. I'm talking about a massive theatre show. It's not that this is a rare time, though. This is a rare time, even though we see this celestial door come and go, come and go, come and go. And there's a constant flow of massive expansion of consciousness as a result of this kind of door portal that opens and closes. About every 100 years, really, as far as I can see. And probably one of the first times we've been on a high enough level technologically to be able to comprehend possibly not truly a fifth dimensional realm yet, as such, where we go beyond this, where this is all projecting into. Beyond this, what we're doing this all for, where we're building our castles in the sky, really. You know, this world, this body, this life being an anvil in which you are truly creating something that's way beyond the fabric of this realm you're in right now. And the more you become aware of that, the more enchanted this life becomes. Because obviously, one feeds into the other. When you become aware of that, it becomes very aware of you. And sometimes we forget what we are, the true nature of who we are and what we are, and the presence of our own being beyond all the noise of who we think we are. Big rush to be busy. We never have to be present. I don't know what I'm going on about right now, guys. I'm very, very tired. I should be in bed asleep. But, you know, there's another doorway closing here for me. You know, I do think, what can I bring into this European election? What can I say? You know, what could I? But I think £5,000 is too much. I think £5,000 is too much, though. I think a lot more people should be able to get involved in this process. It should be a much, much more open process. Money, isn't it? I think if you're going to make it difficult, you can make it difficult in different ways. You know, the democratic process should be a process that should be open and try to encourage everyone to get involved. Open it up. Try and get as many people as you can involved, some voices, some kind of debate, some kind of, you know, they close it all up, they repulse us all out. You know, we had a whole party once on the night of the election in 2001, and we took the whole party to the cow. It was reckless. It was reckless. It was reckless. But it was fun. It was fun. No damage was done. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be, isn't it? Democracy, demo, people, crassy coming together. It's the nearest thing we've seen to a democracy, actually, and never really. That's what it really means. Beyond this stupid theatre show they give to us, we've kind of started believing that this thing that they call democracy is democracy, and that we hate democracy. It's a bit like what they do with Tony Blair in Europe. Democracy, people coming together. That's what it means. Do you hate people coming together when you go to a nice big party and you're there with a load of people? Do you hate it and think, I hate democracy? Just waffling along a load of shit today, and I'm so tired, and I'm in such a funny old space. It's been so emotional with what's happening on a planetary level. And I put myself in these situations when I think about doing these things. It puts me under enormous pressure because I can feel my body setting in to either do something or not do something, and kind of getting to that kind of like, so it puts me under enormous stress if I think I'm going to do it. It's such, you're going to walk into a place and kind of like walking into Bristol, running for mayor of Bristol, and just like you just have to, you just think, oh, I'm going to walk up and walk straight into a hustings in a place I don't really know, and I'm just going to start talking about something I have no clue about whatsoever, and just make it up as I go along, and just make sure that, I don't know, just for the crack. Bearing in mind in Bristol, I mean, there were some obvious kind of flaws, like I think it was 87.5% of the population hadn't voted or had voted no. It was only about like 12.5% that had, or 13% that had actually got a yes vote in for a mayor. Everyone else had either not voted or just like, so it was like this minority that had won. Really kind of set the pace of just how ridiculous this was. And so you had there's some obvious things to play with. But, back then my whole reason for doing it was just to say, guys, Europe's not the baddie here. You're going to be sold Europe is the baddie because they're sewing it all in, but you have to understand that this is all going somewhere very specific. And I was talking about that in 2000. Well, the mayor thing, I think in 2012 or 2011, 2012. It would have been 2012, and that's why I launched it in 2012. So it would have been 2012, and I think for the mayor of London. Not that I paid the 10 grand, but I just did it as much as I could do, really. And the Mayor of Bristol thing in 2013. You say you can't change anything. I'm in such a different mind on that. Would Caroline Lucas have her seat in the Green Party if we hadn't had our big party? They got Keith Taylor, kind of all that popularity. Did we have anything to do with that? Not me. Not Jim Bob, who set the party up. Not any one specific person in the audience, not any one specific person standing on stage, just everyone coming together and bringing that magnificent energy, and people just looking up and suddenly seeing the kind of Brighton count, and it's just, you've got Keith Taylor standing there. He looks like a rock star standing behind a few thousand people just screaming their head off. Is this utterly insane? I sort of had my thumb out at half mast, and this someone in a suit would come up to me and said, you've got to tell everyone to shut up. And I said, I think you're speaking to the wrong person. But I did. I went up and I kind of put my thumb up at half mast, and this Tory guy come up and he was going to go and speak, and he just looked at me and this really angry because he wanted to speak, and everyone was just making a right old noise. And so I told everyone to sort of be quiet, and then I sort of hold my hand out as if to say, can say what you've got to say. And he walked out, and as he walked out, I just put my thumb at half mast, and I dropped it when he started speaking, and it was a bit cruel. It was really a bit cruel, but I was young, and it was kind of like. And anyway, I pretty much did this to pretty much all of them, apart from when Keith Taylor sort of came out, and it was just like, and I could feel it, and it was just like, and I've got to say, I never really clicked with kind of Keith Taylor. You know what I mean? It's just like he just saw me as a total yob-like nutter that was just messing up a political arena that he took really seriously. But I also took very seriously, even though I was kind of in this kind of satire. I've also recognised that, I mean, we have different ways of doing things, don't we? But that was a massive party. I mean, that's because Norman Cook was massive then, you know. The more Norman Cook was pulling a party on the Brighton Beach, just pulling 1 million people. You know what I mean? So you suddenly something comes and you put on plays on the park the night of your party when you've got a party, and you're actually running for government as well. It's just like, it was utterly over the top. But then, of course, then I got blamed for that. Then they came out with this bill to say that the general public couldn't go into the count after that because it was too reckless, and so I got kind of blamed for this kind of thing. But of course, it's kind of that's what democracy looks like, isn't it? Real democracy, people coming together in power. It's a happy scene, isn't it? It's a happy scene. That's how I see democracy. Like a really good party. Lots of people coming together to sort it out. And I haven't got the £5 to run, and of all the people I get to view my whole thing, it's not a criticism on anyone. But we can see which way the wind's blowing, can't we? Well, you all know Europe didn't do it. Germany, bad Germany, because she wouldn't join NATO in bombing Syria. Bad Germany. Evil. What's her name? German Chancellor, Merkel. Evil Merkel letting refugees in. Evil, horrible woman. She should be killing them at sea. Just line up a load of Maxim guns on the shores of kind of like on the shores of Greece or wherever they're coming in, and we'll just like the British did to the Tibetans in kind of 1903. You know, we've all got to see through this. We realize we're a single race now. We're a single species. It's being divided in ourselves to attack ourselves, to weaken ourselves. The way the Spanish the conquistadors, the way they kind of like, the way they first broke kind of like South America, or more Central America, I suppose, was just by finding the divide line in an existing community where there was friction and exacerbating that divide line. Divide and conquer. Divide. Brexit. Suddenly everything is controlled. Corporate freedom to frack you. I'm sorry, I'm tired and take care. Ciao.